I want to talk about serving each other in marriage, because you can serve the church, that's biblical and serving people, but the biggest ministry some people tend to forget, especially when you are in a church ministry or you are doing kingdom minded things, a lot of people forget your family is your first ministry. Hey everyone, welcome back to Season 2, Episode 3 of Ministry for Her podcast. I'm your host, Nikki Black, and today I have a special guest with me.
It's me.
From behind the tie. Yes, if you haven't listened to my husband's podcast, he has a podcast, Behind the Tie, but he's not as cool as me and has video.
Yeah, I don't want video.
Yeah.
I'm not pretty enough for video, so.
No, but in today's episode, we're going to talk about servanthood and serving in all the ways you serve in church, in your family, and marriage, and just kind of sum it up to what serving really is, because serving is part of having, what we're talking about in this season is godly character, and servanthood is part of that. So I'm going to start off with, since I have a guest and it's like I'm interviewing, I'm going to start off by asking you, what is your meaning of serving?
The meaning of serving that I would think of it as being is being able to do what you are asked or what is needed of you, even in moments when you don't necessarily feel like it.
Yeah, but that's just not with people. Like, even with when God tells you to do something.
Well, yeah.
You don't want to do it.
Well, many of us, that's why serving or servanthood many times is hard, because it's something, a lot of times it requires things that we don't want to do, or times in which we don't want to do it. It's easy to serve when it's something that you enjoy or it's the right timing. Where serving or servanthood gets difficult is when you have to do it, or you are asked to do it when you don't really feel like it. And that's where it becomes difficult. But I also think that's where you really see who is here to serve and who is here to just be seen.
Because in this day and age, nobody wants to serve, to be honest, I feel like.
No.
Nobody
it's the world we live in.
Nobody wants to. They want to be hyped up. They want to be just sit there and listen to good music or whatever, but they don't want to get their hands dirty. They want to talk about it, but they don't want to do it.
Right.
I wrote this down in my notes. It says, when God tells us to serve, it's not always in a sense of to lead worship, to do the media, to serve food, or to help around the church. Serving to God is doing His will and what He commands us to do. And that's with your everyday life. God, like I even wrote down, He is telling you to sit in a season and heal than to actually serve in a church.
Right.
You sitting down because you got church hurt in your last church, that is serving. You may not be serving that pastor or the church, but you're serving God, because He's telling you now you have to sit and heal, and then you can actually serve the church.
Right, because if you don't do it in the right ways or the right attitudes, it ends up becoming a mess, for a lack of a better term. I've dealt with people that, quote unquote, we're here to serve, yet
then you never see them again.
Yeah, you never see them again, or they only were there to serve as long as they got a pat on the back, or as long as they were seen. So there's a difference and sometimes sitting is serving. Sometimes you just need to be faithful and just sit, so to speak, and if that's what God's asking you to do, and you don't sit, and yet you serve. I think of the story in the Bible of Mary and Martha. one sat at the feet of Jesus and one served Jesus.
Yeah.
And the one that was serving got upset with the one that was sitting and started complaining to Jesus about the one sitting. And she said, don't you see that I'm doing all the work here? And Jesus said to her, woman, can't you see that this lady that's sitting here at my feet, she's basking in my presence?
Yeah.
So sometimes we get so busy serving that we can forget to sit down and just enjoy the moment.
There's you a sermon right there.
Yeah, I'm already preaching.
Serving.
And I don't even have my tie
Sitting.
on.
Yeah, because we're behind the tie today. I'm ministering behind the tie.
Yeah, something like that.
We can just clash them together. And then I wrote, if he is wanting you to give up social media and focus on your family more, or whatever the case is, you're serving. You're serving God and you're serving your family. You're not serving social media. Because I put, serving others is not just doing stuff for them, but respecting, loving, and honoring them just like Christ does us. So we have to think, because we are serving them, like, we could be really bad pastors and just get up there and serve, like, give people the word and do all that stuff. But if we don't respect, love them, and honor them, then I feel like we're not doing that correctly.
Right.
Even though some people we want to love,
right,
with a big smack on the face, a love tap.
The right hand of righteousness.
That's right. But Colossians 3:23-24 says, whatever you do, work heartedly as for the Lord and not for men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the inheritance as your reward. You are serving the Lord Christ. And what I've talked about in this whole, last two episodes, was godly character is all about your heart posture. Like, you can be a good person and have good principles, but, not be a Christian. There's difference in biblical character and just worldly character. So all that goes with, if you're not doing it with the right heart, just like we talked about last episode, if you're not tithing in the right heart, then you're pretty much missing the mark. You're missing the whole point of what the Bible's trying to teach you. But in this day and age, especially the social media realm with podcast and YouTube and Instagram and Facebook, we look at, I want to be like that person, I want to be like that person, and we start serving the internet.
Right.
But we're not called to serve the internet. We're not called to serve analytics. We're not called to serve algorithms. And we don't serve money to provide for us. We don't serve our spouse to fulfill us. We have to serve the one true God. Because he can, like, for me doing this podcast, yeah, of course, would it be cool to look on YouTube and see, oh my gosh, I got 10,000 likes and 1 million views on a video? That would be really cool. But then I feel like God doesn't do that right now, because he's like, you have to make sure you're not serving this algorithm. You're not going to serve analytics every time you look at your YouTube views. We have to learn to serve God. And just like, with your podcast, we get to, we talk about, how many downloads you have, it gets to where we start. And even just like we had a revival this last couple of days where we thought we should have had better numbers. And then we get discouraged because we think, we should have, done better. But I feel like who was needed to be there was there. Right. And we were there to serve God, not to whoever was to come in there.
Right. Well, I think we have to be careful with serving. I think this is a kingdom mindset, but I also think it's something that we can put in our everyday world, whether it be at work or at home, or in the things that we enjoy for fun. Um, and this comment is, I want to clarify, this comment has nothing to do with a race or racist, but we have to be careful that we don't confuse a servanthood mindset with a slavery mindset. Servanthood is, I still have a choice. You get to serve. I get to go up and show up Sunday morning or Wednesday night and serve my church, or I get to get up and go to work and serve, or I get to go home. I have a family. I get to serve them. The slavery mindset is those choices are taken away from you.
You have to,
and
no matter
you
what.
have to, regardless. If you're told, you have to. If you don't, there's consequences. And none of us want to be that. But if we aren't careful, serving becomes an obligation rather than an opportunity. And sometimes we are obligated, or we feel obligated, because we have this slavery mentality that I have to, or else.
Yeah.
Instead of looking at it as an opportunity, saying, you know what, I get to serve. I get to help. I get to mop the floors. I get to do all these things, instead of saying, well, you know what, I've got to. So we have to be careful in that mindset, that we stay pure in that thought of serving with the right attitude and serving in the right spirit.
Yeah. Because we can get into that. Well, even for you, being a pastor, it's like some days you don't want to get up there and, preach. And sometimes I'd love to stay at bedside assembly, but you won't let me.
Well, somebody's got to get up and go to church. So.
Just kidding. So now we're going to shift gears a little bit on serving, and we're going to, in small little nugget right here, or warning, if you are watching this or listening to this with kids that you don't want to hear certain things, and you need to cut this off now, because
I'm really nervous all of a sudden.
Because we're going to talk about...
I think I'm feeling sick.
We're going to talk about marriage things. So if you don't want your young kids yet to hear stuff like that, then cut it off now, and then you can fast forward it. But I want to talk about serving each other in marriage, because you can serve the church, that's biblical, and serving people, but the biggest ministry some people tend to forget, especially when you are in a church ministry, or you are doing kingdom-minded things, a lot of people forget your family is your first ministry. Me.
Well, in the Bible, God created family before he did the church.
Yeah, it wasn't like he said, I'm going to create this church and fill it with people, and then all that. No, it was family. So now, wifeys, listen up. I'm going to give you some free marriage advice, even though we haven't been married forever. But
we haven't?
No, but I'm going to, what I know and what my mother has told me, because my mother has given me this advice too. So your lovely mother-in-law has given me this advice recently. So Mom, if you don't want to listen, turn it off.
I'm really nervous.
But, okay, in my notes it says, and I do have Bible to back this up. So, if your husband is grumpy, sleepy, aggravated, stressed, whatever, if he's just whatever, there's one thing that I know that can cheer him up.
And what is that?
Let's talk about sex, baby. That's what it is. So, wives, the best way to serve your husband and his needs, because I did write down, it says, let me find it. Like 85% or something like that. I can't remember the deal, but it says surveys show that sex is one of the man's most important needs, if not the most important.
I wouldn't disagree with that as a man. Yeah.
And here's Bible. Ephesians 5:22-30. It says, wives, and we've all heard this, I'm sure. Wives, submit to your own husbands, as it says, their own husbands, not other people's husbands, your own husband, as to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church, his body and is himself its Savior. Now, as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit in everything to their husbands. So when a wife resists intimacy or is uninterested, her husband can feel rejection.
Yeah.
Is that right, husband?
It is, because it's a way that we as men show our love and our compassion. I'm glad that God made us men different than you women. So glad I'm a man.
Now, I've been seeing this around YouTube or Facebook, talking about, what makes a woman a woman? What makes a man a man? All this gender stuff. We won't get into all that, but
Yeah.
Are you sure you're a man?
Well, I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
He's a man.
I'm not confused.
He's a man.
But that's just the way that we as men, I think that we're wired and we operate in our love language, so to speak, that we desire intimacy, and that's the way that we connect. That's the way that we show our love and our compassion towards our spouse. And women a lot of times are different because they need or want other things. It's not necessarily sex, because sex is and instead of it being number one or number two, which it is on probably any guy's list, it's 4, 5, or 6 on a woman's list.
Because, we have to think about, okay, this has to be done, this has to be done, this has to be done, this has to be done. And then
I'm just chopped liver.
In the woman's mind, because I didn't look this up, but I know that probably 99.9% of men cannot multitask, especially think-wise. You can't sit here and think about, okay, for tomorrow, okay, Stilly has to get this done, but I need to do this and this. And you can be thinking all those things, and then going home and folding laundry and doing the dishes or whatever. Men have one-track minds. Their minds are like filing cabinets. Each individual thing has its own slot, and you can't open up all those things at once. One at a time. You have to look at one at a time.
You're saying we're simple.
Yes. Yeah. And women, that's just how, I guess, a lot of us are programmed. We have to, we overthink. We think too much.
Yes. But I overthink a lot, so.
Yes. And I wrote this down. Your husband's sexual needs should be more important and higher on any priority list, like housework, projects, activities, and even the children. It does not mean that I should think about sex all day long, every day, but it does mean that I should find ways to fulfill my husband's needs. And that means if I have to save energy and time, and say, okay, like us women do, we're planners. We can say, okay, I know that's not very romantic and stuff, but a lot of people who have busy lives, especially with children at home, you can't just throw everything off the counter and go ahead.
That would be a new one.
I mean, you can't. I mean, you can't because then here's poor little silly Austin Lang going to walk in want to get a snack and their dad's already.
You really just went there, didn't you? I mean, I was thinking it, but I wasn't going to say nothing.
I'll say it, and his daddy's already getting a snack.
But I think I'd speak for a lot of men, maybe, and we're all different in ways with this, but I think women think that we like sit around and like we think nothing about like other than sex, like 24/7, like we're just a bunch of like, you know, men just, ready to go like all day, every day. I don't think that's the case. Now, is it something that we think about or something that we, need or want daily or yeah, probably so.
Daily?
Yeah. But I think that's just men in general. And I think that's where a lot of frustrations comes with in marriages is because of the kids and the schedules and the busyness and the ball games and the doctor's appointments and the cleaning the house and just the different things that happen and the different things that go on. By the time the day ends, you know, she's exhausted and ready for bed, and us men were like, well, wait a second, what about,
Yeah.
you know, and then that frustration lies there, and it continues, and I've seen it, with a lot of people, as a pastor, when I've talked to people and even marriage counseling, that like one of the biggest things most of the time, not all the time, but one of the biggest things that is an issue is the sex life that they have or the lack thereof. And it's almost always, if not always, the man complaining about not having a sex life in their marriage and not the woman.
Yeah.
So it is an important part for us men because we feel like that's how we show our love and our compassion. But in return, we also feel important. It also makes us feel it's like it's almost like affirmation to us that
That we love y'all.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it's like an affirmation that hey, like I still got it.
You got it.
I got it.
Well, and that in marriages and serving in marriages is that to me is just the number one thing is your sexual relationship with your spouse has to be well because sex is biblical. It has to be, biblical. There's difference in. I mean, I don't want to turn this into a sex marriage podcast episode, but um, when you feel safe, when you feel like when you know that you're safe in your own marriage bed, women need to feel safe and secure and that where they're at is comfortable and
Right.
everything is agreed upon. Nothing's going to be done there that's not like I don't want done or he doesn't want done.
Right.
It all comes down with, like I said, love, respect, and whatever else I said earlier.
Well, and I think an important thing that
And honor, yeah. Love, respect, and honoring. Like, I know he loves me, I know he respects me, and I know he honors me, and vice versa. Like, I would never, you know, do something out of what's not just me and him.
Right. Well, and I think something that the ladies need to like remember, and I'm speaking from a man here, is we see it. It happens, I think, in every marriage that you get married and it's like, this intimate moment is very frequent with your
Yeah.
spouse, and then a year, 2 years into it, like it like just stops. It just like out of nowhere, it just ends, and then. And I think the reason why that happens a lot of times is it is the busyness too of you know what we do every day, every week. But I think some of it too is the complacency that we get in our marriage. Like, oh,
Yeah.
I've got him now. Like I don't have nothing to prove. I mean, he knows I love him, or she knows I love him, and and we get complacent, and complacency, and we get, I'm gonna be very blunt, we get boring, and so there's nothing there to like keep it interesting or spicy or see. I think it's important to do things to like keep it interesting,
Yeah. And if
for lack of a better term, to keep both parties interested in each other.
and
Now that doesn't mean like you have to go there and like let your freak flag like fly high or nothing crazy, but like keep it spicy and keep it interesting with each other, because it's vitally important that you don't get complacent and it just is a chore for you to like have these moments with your husband.
yeah. And that's different. You can have a different view on that if you're married and you're in the world and then you say spice things up. That can mean a whole different term to a worldly marriage than it does to a godly marriage. I think because I've done both, and it's different. It's different terms when you say spice things up. That meant totally something different before to where it does now to me, and that's in a sense for me to where I can say when he says spice things up, I know it's not going to be
Well, yeah.
take me to Sodom and Gomorrah and
Well, I'm just, when I say that, like, there's probably not a man out there that's going to, like, shoot you down or turn you down if you were, like, to show up and, like, be dressed in something sexy, or, like, did something that was really attractive to him. I just I don't think, maybe there are, and there probably is, but, like, you can't get complacent in that moment, because then it becomes a routine, and it just, like I said, it almost becomes like a chore. And then that's where you're like, well, why do I have to do that tonight? Or why do I got to do that this week? Like, it's the same old, same old. Like, so
right.
you have to do something to keep it from getting dull and boring and getting
And it's
complacent in your
throughout the
marriage.
day, you know. Like we've texted throughout the day on that issue leading up to the night.
We have?
Really? I hope Mom don't watch this episode.
I mean, Robbie, apparently you're the one that gave her some of this advice, so.
She did. And I will not tell the world what my mama said. We'll save that for when me and her have a podcast together. If she wants to mention any of that, we might say that. I don't know if I even told you.
I would rather not know.
Yeah.
It might be weird.
But she's been married for 40 years, so apparently she knows what she's talking about.
Well,
So,
don't disagree.
yeah. So to get off of that before we turn it into this marriage podcast and sex podcast, I just want to talk about super quick what it means. We talk about serving marriages and serving the church, and and how it is for you to serve, what it looks like when you serve your community, you know?
Right.
Like, does serving just look like we're going to host a church event and people come? That is serving. But I think serving your community can be anything as to you put your basket up at Walmart.
Right. Well, serving, I think, especially in your community, it's being there to help when there's a need. Like, I think back, I think it was like 3 or 4 years ago, we had a big storm that blew through on a Saturday night here in Roland, and absolutely, like, the town of in the city of Roland looked like a bomb had went off. Like, huge, massive trees. You remember this? Were like all over.
Yeah.
We were out of electricity for what, like 3 days, and we didn't have church that Sunday morning because we didn't have electric. And I called the men of the church to get together, and we met at the church that morning. Now, we didn't have church, but what we did is we had, I don't know, 12, 15 guys showed up with rakes and shovels and chainsaws, and we went throughout the community
Just cutting down trees.
and helping cut up limbs and trees, and it wasn't about, oh, look at us. It was about, like, hey, there's a need right now.
Yeah. And
How can we help?
And it wasn't like, hey, we're from Woodland Hills. I mean, I don't know if y'all did say that or not, but I mean, a lot of people want to, if they're serving their community, they want to make sure that they put a
Right.
title to, hey, I want you to make sure that y'all know I'm the pastor of Woodland Hills and I'm helping you cut this tree down.
Right.
Sometimes just doing it without being known. They can be like, yeah, I don't know, a bunch of guys just came and cut down our.
I remember when we did that, like, so some of us were in the church van, and then, like, we had a couple of vehicles that had, truck and trailer, but then the rest of us got in the church van. We were driving around town, and we were out at a residence cutting up this big tree, and, we had the trucks out front, the church van out front, and mind you, it was middle of July, so it was really hot. And then a young lady showed up and brought us a big case of water. And she came up to us and she said, I want to say thank you guys as a church for being out here doing what you're doing, and brought us a big case of water. It wasn't about us as a church. It was just about us, like, serving and trying to help in our community. And then people saw that and were like, wow, that's pretty cool. So serving in your community is about being there when, like, there's a need and there's help needed.
Yeah. I mean, the Bible says, love thy neighbor.
Right.
And that doesn't just have to mean your next door neighbor. It just means someone that's out there. I think it's your neighbor my neighbor could be like in Poto or Fort Smith. Our neighbors in Fort Smith, whatever.
Right.
I think it's just, people in general. Love thy neighbor.
Well, you have to serve, and like I said, it's in the time of need is where people need help the most. And that's like when you see tornadoes hit communities or floods hit communities. You see, like, big organizations like, going down.
American Red Cross.
And there's many others that show up. And then you have all these people from, like, neighboring states that show up that don't even know these people to help clean up and to help to restore. And I think part of that is because we understand the scripture that says, do unto others as you would have them do unto yourself. I always try to think about that when I'm helping or when I'm serving. Like, how would I want to be treated if I was this person?
And what is it you say? People will never know that you care when they know you.
Yeah, people don't know. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Yeah.
And that's true. And they know you care when you show up when you weren't called. You weren't asked. You just showed up and you were there to help. You were there to serve. You were there to cut trees. You were there to hand out water. You were there to, pay for some gas, get them a hamburger at McDonald's. Like, there's so many different ways you can serve and you can be there for your community. You have to do it when there's a time of need, And the biggest part of this is you have to be available.
Yeah.
You can't serve if there's not availability.
Right.
And many of us, and a lot of us, we want to go hide, or we want to, turn to a blind eye, and out of sight, out of mind, kind of a thing. And if we're going to serve and we're going to have an impact in our community, we have to be available.
Yeah.
And availability means a lot.
Yeah. And that's also availability in your church, in your community, in your marriage, with your family, all that. Because you can't serve if you're not available.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, I think that's really all I had for this episode, was just to talk about just different ways you can serve and how you can serve and what it means to serve with marriage and and how to serve your kids even. It's not just being, cleaning up after them and being there for them. That's part of serving them, but we have to serve with the number one goal in mind, is to love like Jesus would, to be like Jesus would, and to serve like he would, no matter who it is.
Right. Well, I've always said Jesus really didn't come, and I can't remember the scripture off the top of my head, but it's in there because we preached about it not too long ago in the book of John when we did our Bible study on Wednesday nights. Jesus didn't really come to save the world as much as he did to come serve the world.
Yeah.
Now, he saved the world and us in the process of that, and that's why he came. But he came to serve us. And if Jesus, the Savior of the universe, the one that died on the cross for us, came to serve, then
we are no better.
What makes us so high and mighty that we can't serve? So, yeah, serving is very, very vital and very important in church, in your home, in your marriage, in your community, on your job. Serving is vitally important, and
it should be the, like, what makes you as a Christian is serving. No matter if you're a Christian, you should serve. If you follow Jesus Christ, you should serve.
Yep.
And you have to listen. That's why you have to have your own relationship with Christ to know, how can I serve? Or when do I need to serve? Is this the right time to serve? We can't tell you that.
Right.
You have to discern that for yourself between you and the Lord. But, yeah, that's all I have for this episode.
Yep. I enjoyed it. Thanks for having me on Nikki's podcast, Ministry for Her. So I enjoyed it.
Yeah, and be watching. Well, you can't watch me on his, but be listening for me on his one day.
Are you trying to put yourself into my podcast? Is that
Yep.
what you're inviting your own self?
Yes, because
Okay.
I want to be famous like you.
Yeah, you're getting there.
But nope. I thank y'all for watching this episode. And again, if you're just listening to this on audio, I want you to head on over to YouTube, because you can watch the whole video on us interacting and just being goofy. And
the awkward faces.
And the awkward faces and everything. So, yeah. I hope y'all have a very blessed week, and I'll see y'all on the next episode next week. Love y'all.